Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. My name is Brandon, and welcome to this Free State Colorado interview. The mission of Free State Colorado is to create a culture of liberty, freedom of the individual, and a free market. This November, Colorado voters will have a historic opportunity to pass Initiative 58, the Natural Medicine Health Act of 2022. This landmark ballot measure will establish regulated medical access program for licensed healing centers where natural medicines could be dispensed by medical professionals. Not only that, but Initiative 58 would also decriminalize these five natural medicines: DMT, ibogaine, mescaline, psilocybin, and psilocin. Today, I'm joined by the individuals behind Natural Medicine Colorado and this incredible measure. These enterprising activists are at the forefront of Colorado's liberty movement. Kevin Matthews and Veronica Perez, I hope you are well, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Brandon, it's an honor to be here.
Well, great. So let's start. What was the primary motivation behind this measure?
Yeah, thank you. So the primary motivation behind the Natural Medicine Health Act really was to create a safely regulated, thoughtful, and accessible model for Coloradans to simply have another choice in improving their mental health and well-being. So really making these natural medicines as accessible to as many folks in Colorado who can safely benefit from them.
Great. Well, I know it's quite a process to get something on the ballot and market it. So how long have you guys been working on this?
That's um, yeah. I mean, for me personally, this has been an extension of the work that I started in Denver with our Initiative 301 there. I mean, this measure in particular, Veronica, 15, 16 months, longer than that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a process, and we really started drafting this. Had some initial meetings last summer, started drafting it this fall, and it was very much a community-oriented drafting process, and it gave us an incredible final product that we're bringing to Colorado voters this November.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah.
It's been absolutely incredible. Like the stories that we have heard of the incredible changes that people have been able to make in their mental health, the alleviation of the suffering and depression, like coming out of the woodworks and letting us know. It's been huge and really gratifying to just see the amount of people that are looking forward to this because they've already been able to receive healing, and to be able to receive healing in this way, being able to go to a healing center and feel safe and clear and protected. It's such an awesome gift to be able to give to our community.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, mental health is definitely one of the hot topics these days when it comes to the well-being of our society and our culture. And I think with these natural medicines, talk back in the day in the 60s, Carlos Castaneda and Timothy Leary and all of these have kind of been percolating in our culture for a long time, but it seems recently, they've gained a lot more legitimacy through a lot of the scientific studies that I've seen on your website. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity out there to really create change, a positive change in our society.
Couldn't agree more. I think we could certainly benefit from a lot more positive change in our society these days. And like doing this work, I think is one part of that equation. And what brings me the most joy, honestly, is listening to so many other folks sharing their stories about how this work has tremendously impacted their lives, and hearing how folks after they've had an experience, it's like they have a new lease on being human. These days, being human may be quite a stressful thing for a lot of people, and these natural medicines, I firmly believe can certainly release some of the tension and provide new clarity and space to really move forward in a way that's integrated and frankly very powerful.
Awesome. Awesome. And well, it will benefit. It seems like it can really benefit a lot of people. And I'm very interested in the stories that you've heard and the people whose lives have already been positively affected. What would you say to someone, though, these parents out there who are so worried? On the news every day, you're hearing about fentanyl and drugs in schools. So, what would you say to some parents or someone who might be worried about children getting access to these substances if this passes?
Yeah, yeah, it's a really important question, Brandon. I mean, Veronica and I are both parents. And if we're strictly speaking, looking at the Natural Medicine Health Act, for someone who's worried about their kids getting access to these substances, first of all, this measure does not allow for retail or recreational sales at all. So there's not going to be dispensaries where a person could just walk in, purchase some natural medicines and then leave and take them home. So really, it's not going to be any easier for anyone under 21 to access these medicines, and there will be civil penalties for anyone who is under 21 and is found to be in possession of natural medicines. And then furthermore, in the home, natural medicines must be secure from access by anyone who is under 21 years old. So that's lock and key. And I want to make it really clear that the recreational sales of natural medicines will still be considered a crime in Colorado. So with the measure itself, taking this into consideration and really prioritizing, personal and public safety, we've done a very good job in including provisions that just account for responsible, informed use of natural medicines.
And for the record, this is not legalization. It is not legalization. As Kevin said, I'm a mom. I have quite a few kids at home. And this has made me a better parent to be able to move out of the amount of anxiety and frustration I was carrying. I had complex PTSD myself, and what I was going through, needing to take care of my kids, needing to work, needing to provide, needing to, also have a relationship with my husband and their father. And, I know a lot of parents feel similarly, just the stress and trying to do that with the best that we can by our kids. And that takes a toll. And I can't put it any other way. It made me a better parent. The stress came off. I was able to more with kids and laugh more with them and play with them. It made me a better partner to my husband. It has helped me, and like, oh my God, just I can't even go on. It's done worlds for me, and I have sat my kids down and talked to them about this and the other drugs that are out there, real drugs that are out there, this whole thing, and take away the mystery of it and talk to them, let them know. And it's, believe it or not, I did the same thing with alcohol, and they're fine. They know what it is. They're good. Okay, I don't have any interest. I'm happy that mom's happy. I'm happy that dad's happy. Now, can we go up to Idaho Hot Springs and play in the pool?
Oh, that's great.
And Brandon, if your audience is interested, there's actually a great article that was a story that was posted by Colorado Public Radio. I think it was about a month ago. And just for folks, if you Google CPR microdosing moms, there are quite a few moms in that article who were featured who talk about everything Veronica just shared in terms of how responsibly using these medicines has really impacted them as parents, as spouses, and frankly as human beings, as a part of these communities. It's a great article.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, so much of our natural medicines have been suppressed for so many years. Ancient or indigenous cultures have discovered tools to help us live, right? I mean, they've kind of this discovery process has been going on for a long time of discovering what plants do what. And it's pretty exciting to see that, there's these traditions that have been passed along, these practices that can really make an impact on our lives today. The problems we're facing aren't too new. So pretty cool to see that there's this renewed effort to really bring these cultural practices practices and to bring these medicines to the forefront and test it out, right? I mean, try and see what it can do for people. So pretty amazing. Really excited with what you guys are doing. Thank you very much for all your hard work that you've been doing. And I really hope that, people, the myths can kind of be dispelled, that it's not going to be accessible to children. It's not legalization. It's not recreational sales. It's not going to look like the current cannabis industry that we have. But what would you say to a voter who worries that this measure will only provide an excuse for people just to get high, to trip out, with all the, what would you say to somebody?
Yeah, I mean, for folks who think that this measure might be an excuse to get high or trip, I mean, first of all, just to reiterate, there won't be dispensaries. There's not a retail model here or recreational model. Recreational sales again are not allowed. They're still going to be considered a crime. What this measure is designed to do, though, it's intended for people who can benefit to be able to access these medicines in a safe and structured way, which includes guidance and supervision from trained and licensed facilitators. And folks will be able to access these medicines either at licensed healing centers, in the comfort and safety of their own home with supervision and guidance by a facilitator, and also at approved healthcare locations, palliative care, hospice care, addiction treatment centers. We're really looking at how we can integrate the model that we've created a little bit more even into our existing mental health infrastructure to simply provide more options and more choice for people to address their mental health. So it's not going to be available for folks to be able to purchase, right? Unless you're doing that through a healing center. Where they would be used on site at that location. And then again, just in terms of the personal use provisions, we do have guardrails with how this is being decriminalized, and that really includes prioritizing safety and making sure that just folks really understand how to use these medicines in a safe way that can really maximize the benefits.
And I would say also look at I mean, this has been decriminalized already for how many years in Denver? We're not seeing people wanting to get high or trying to get high or walking around high. We don't see that. Oregon, you're not seeing that. We already have examples where things have been decriminalized and we didn't have significant issues. We didn't really have any issues with kids, with taking this recreationally and causing problems with really much of anything. I talked to quite a few people that didn't even know that it was decriminalized in Denver, and they live in Denver.
Yeah, it's a great point, Veronica. Just really quickly on that. If folks should take a look at an organization called Unlimited Sciences, they've been partnering and working with Johns Hopkins University to conduct it's the largest observational psilocybin study of its kind in the U.S. And they're specifically looking at psilocybin use outside of clinical settings. I think they say in the wild is the term that they use, and we included some of that information in our Denver comprehensive report that we submitted to the city last November. And the preliminary data, shows that most people who are choosing to use psilocybin mushrooms, they're doing so with intention, in safe environments, and honestly to self-treat their own mental health conditions. And it's just the kind of thing where I think education is so critical, and it's important that Coloradans really understand what informed use can look like and how these medicines can have a tremendous impact in people's lives.
Awesome. So we might see these, natural health healing centers pop up in Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, some of those cities, I imagine. But what about the conservative communities across Colorado? Are they going to be allowed to prevent these natural medicine centers from being established locally? How's that going to look like?
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking that one, Brandon. Local municipalities, which includes, cities and counties, they can regulate the time, place, and manner um, of where healing centers are located, for example. But local municipalities may not restrict healing centers in their communities. And the reason for this is because this is a matter of statewide concern for Coloradans. And even if we're looking at this from an equity perspective or an accessibility perspective, it may be really challenging for some folks to actually have to travel across county lines or go to the next city over to be able to get and receive, supervised access to these medicines. So that's what the measure, the measure again allows for local municipalities to regulate the time, place, and the manner. So they can determine where healing centers are located, but they cannot prohibit healing centers from operating in their jurisdictions.
Oh, interesting. Very, very interesting. So it seems like a lot of this is, going to be determined, a lot of what the actual healing centers will look like and kind of how the rules are going to be set up by a regulatory board. Is that right? They're going to be kind of creating the new regulations. And how's that going to look like? What role is this regulatory board going to play in establishing these healing centers?
V, do you want to jump in with the advisory panel with that
Yeah.
one and how they're
Yeah, I think it was something that we learned from other measures and just organization and creation of any kind of regulations. We took those learnings into account and we formed an advisory board that needs to have previous experience with these medicines, that has multiple different disciplines and different understandings to be able to come together and collaborate. People that have cultural backgrounds. One specifically has to be someone that comes from an indigenous, spiritual, cultural background, that has an understanding of how these medicines have been used in indigenous culture, that can speak to keeping that respect and keeping that equity going within this measure. They will be advising the Department of Regulatory Agencies, DORA. It will be advising them in how we're going to keep this equitable, how the license programs are going to be designed, what goes into the licenses. It's going to be a tiered process. So it's not going to be only medical trained people that can come in and become facilitators. If you are a medical trained person and you've done all school and you're working, psychiatrists and neurologists, been doing it for a long time. We're also taking into account that you don't need to be taking the same license programs as someone who doesn't have that educational background. So we're looking into that as we've made set up an equity fund, because we do understand that there are a lot of people that have the resources to receive this type of healing. And everybody should have access to these medicines. To me, it's a fundamental human right to choose how you want to treat your mental health, how you want to engage in your spiritual practice. It's a human right. And if there are people that aren't able to engage in these services, then we absolutely should be helping them to make sure that there is a pathway and an avenue available to them to receive this. It isn't just about those that are in I call it the depths of despair. I love The Princess Bride. There are a lot of people that are just hurting. It doesn't have to be this massive, significant trauma. There are a lot of small traumas. I work with people every single day working through their traumas, and to them, it's not a small trauma. It's something that derailed their life, and they need to be able to have access to that too. It doesn't matter what religion you are, what culture you are, how much money you make, where you come from. None of these things should matter. These are plants that grow naturally, that we are aware enough and know enough, and now we've got science, which really helps us trust that these things help. They heal the brain. the components of this are absolutely incredible. I really encourage people to really look up and see how this medicine works in the brain and how it's able to reconnect things and boost things. And I could go on and on. So yes, the answer to the question is we have an incredible advisory board that we're going to be set up to be appointed by the governor that are going to be advising Dora to make sure that this stays in the spirit of what we've written here under the intention of why we wrote it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's nice to see that there's going to be outside input from people who have experience with these substances, indigenous cultural experience as well. People who can come in, and we're not leaving it all in the hands of some bureaucrats, right, to decide, and politicians, because we don't want them necessarily making these decisions for us if they don't have any experience with it. They don't know what they're doing, and they might be resistant to it as well. They might, wouldn't be the first time politicians are resistant to the will of the voters. So really excited to hear about that advisory board and how that process will work, where there can be, some community input and community control over this measure if it passes. So that's awesome. I'd like to, Veronica, Kevin, can you talk a little bit about how these substances have been shown to treat mental health conditions? I know you were talking about that a little bit previously, Veronica, and Kevin, you were mentioning the health studies as well. But, what can we say about that? I guess briefly, how have these substances been shown to treat people?
Yeah. For the past 20 years, there is incredibly strong clinical evidence that demonstrates psilocybin could be a very effective treatment for things like major depression, treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, anxiety, tobacco addiction, substance abuse disorder. And this is research that's coming out of really premier universities, Johns Hopkins, NYU here in the States, Imperial College of London out in the UK. Right now, psilocybin has the most research behind it. In 2018 and 2019, it was granted breakthrough therapy status by the FDA to treat as a treatment for, respectively, treatment-resistant depression and major depression. So, the studies are incredibly promising. And I think it's also critical for folks to understand and maybe even remember is that these medicines were being studied at the university level in the 1950s and 1960s with, at that time, tremendous results. Now, it wasn't that they weren't necessarily double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical studies that were conducted back then, but there is a very, frankly, tremendous body of research demonstrating the efficacy of natural medicines to really address the things that we suffer from as humans with our mental and behavioral health issues. So, there's a lot more research to be done in other areas. We do know, again, from the research that, first of all, natural medicines like psilocybin, they're not addictive. Some might even say they're anti-addictive. I know a lot of folks who, who've had an experience, maybe it was a macro dose, a larger dose, and they're like, man, I don't need to go back there for a long time because I have a lot to work on right now. The insights someone might get from that experience. So I'm very excited and looking forward to more research that's coming out in terms of like traumatic brain injury. Veronica hinted at neurogenesis and how these medicines can form like new synaptic pathways. So, but we do know from very strong evidence on the research that in terms of a mental health treatment option, these medicines work.
Mm-hmm. And to put it simply, PTSD, it's a loop. You're in a loop. You replay it over and over and over again. The medicines break the loop. Once it's broken, you have a new choice. You're not play. It gets triggered accidentally and you're just trying to live your life. That loop is broken. And it's amazing what you are capable of when you're off of that rabbit wheel or rat wheel, whatever.
Well said, V. That was great.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love it. This is very exciting. And it's amazing to see that here finally in 2022, we're able to hopefully get society to kind of move to the point where these things can be explored and used purposefully So if passed, what is the timeline for implementation? What do you foresee as when would you foresee the first treatment centers appearing?
Yeah. And I can keep this really concise. So we're successful on November 8th. That's election day. 2 weeks later, the governor would ratify it into law. At that time, as we mentioned, DMT, ibogaine, mescaline, not including peyote, psilocybin, and psilocin would be decriminalized across the state for adults over 21. Again, not including, not for recreational retail sales. At that time, it'll activate appointing the advisory board in that process, which is going to be a public process. There are folks from anywhere across the state, maybe across the country, would be able to apply for the advisory board. The advisory board needs to be appointed by the end of January 2023. And by the end of September 2024, that's when the state needs to start accepting applications for licenses for healing centers and to become a trained facilitator. And then about 18 months after that, by June 1st, 2026, only with a recommendation from the Natural Medicine Advisory Board could the Department of Regulatory Agencies then include the other natural medicines, DMT, ibogaine, and mescaline. So I forgot to mention, and I know Veronica mentioned earlier, that we're only starting with psilocybin mushrooms in the regulated model. So end of September 2024 for that. So, to actually answer your question, we could see potentially healing centers opening up here across the state in early 2025. So we still have a couple of years and a lot of work to do to implement things.
Totally worth it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's very beneficial for some voters out there who might be a little on the fence whether to vote for this or support it or not, to know that it's going to be a gradual process. It's not going to be something that just happens overnight, So that's I think reassuring to some people that there's going to be a lot of thought, a lot of effort, and a lot of regulation, I guess, put into it to ensure that things are going to go as intended.
Yeah.
Just quickly, regarding decriminalization, any idea who will determine or how will they determine how much is defined for personal use? If somebody has this substance, psilocybin, for example, they're using it to treat their mental health conditions under this initiative, they're allowed to legally have an amount for personal use. Any idea how that's going to be defined?
Yeah, and that was very intentional. That we did not define any specific limits for personal use. And the reason why, frankly, and some of this kind of piggybacks off our work in Denver, is that we don't believe it's our responsibility or really, frankly, our right to determine what an acceptable amount looks like for personal use. Honestly, that's between a person and their caregiver. So what it looks like right now is that is going to be left up to law enforcement discretion. The General Assembly of the state legislature, we don't know if they're going to suggest putting in limits. What we learned in Denver from this is that basically we wanted to see how it went. So in Denver, our first meetings there, this question was brought up, like, there aren't any defined limits. And as it turns out, our mushroom panel there determined that deprioritizing psilocybin did not have any significant public health or safety issue or risk in the city. So what I like to emphasize, and I think what your audience may really appreciate, is that simply having natural medicines in your possession, if this measure were to pass, does not constitute enough reasonable suspicion for a crime. The natural medicines may not be harmed, seized, or destroyed, or confiscated. So police officers or law enforcement personnel, they need to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that a person may be distributing natural medicines for profit. Otherwise, individuals are protected and these medicines are protected as well.
Fascinating. That's very exciting. It definitely for the libertarians out there and the liberty-minded Coloradans, it's an incredible thing to see, and hopefully it goes through. So, I guess one last question too, maybe Veronica, what effect will this have on individuals who have been conducting medicinal healing through religious or shamanic practices previous to this measure being voted on?
If they're not operating within the realm of a church, for example, you won't have to be having your heart leap into your throat if you get a knock at the door when you're in ceremony. The fear of being attacked or fined or ticketed or taken to jail for conducting these ceremonies is gone. It's, to me, that's going to be an amazing thing. I have sat in ceremony where you're trying to heal and you're facing some traumas that you've been running away from for years, and you hear a knock at the door. And what that does when you're working through something that is painful, it's terrifying. It's not okay. I mean, it was someone that was lost, wonderful, but to not have that threat, to not have that fear hanging over our heads, that's a big deal. The freedom for both the participants to know that they're okay, they're safe. And the same thing for the shamans and the practitioners, to know that you can't hassle me, you can't hurt me, you can't judge me. That's a big deal. It's something that people that have been working in this field have been dealing with for decades. That constant fear in the back of their minds, that constant fear of what I could stand to lose. I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to serve my community and help people heal. And I have in the back of my mind constantly this fear of being prosecuted for it. And that's going to be
Wow.
gone.
Wow. Truly life-changing and a historic opportunity we have here in Colorado. So where can people learn more and how can they support your efforts?
naturalmedicinecolorado.org, at Natural Medicine Colorado on Facebook and Instagram. We do have an upcoming ambassador training next week on the 21st. So anybody who wants to be more involved and wants to support our measure through our really decentralized and mycelial organizing program, highly encouraged to attend. So folks can go to the website. Again, that's naturalmedicinecolorado.org. Click on Get Involved, and they'll see a link there to sign up and RSVP for our ambassador training next week. And you're going to see us out there over the next 6.5, 7 weeks, just educating Coloradans. We'll be at events. We're going to be on TV. It's going to be quite. It's going to be such a fun next couple of weeks. Rather, used to be months, now it's weeks. So find us on social.
Oh, and it's not Initiative 58 anymore. It's 122. So vote for one yes on 122.
122. All right, I'll make sure to put that everywhere. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time today, Veronica, Kevin. Take care and let me know anything I can do to help.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.